In this video, we'll cover the git add command, which is the first of two commands that we'll use to make a commit. And as we previously talked about in the last video, we use two commands because that allows us to separate out particular changes we've made. We can, I think I used the imagery of tweezers, we can tweeze them out and select them before we make a commit. So we can group things together. And this git add command is what enables that to happen. So once we've done some work, we've actually made changes, we then call those changes out using the git add command to stage them for a commit, and then we can make a commit. And in this video, we're focusing on the first piece. And before we can do anything with Git, we need to make some changes. We need to do that first part, work on stuff. So I'm going to do a quick demo. I made this folder, my first novel. I'm pretending I'm writing a novel. We have a Git repository in here as we initialized it earlier. So I'm now pretending to sit down. It's day one of writing my novel, and I'm going to do some work. And if I was actually writing a novel, I would probably start by making an outline. That's just how I like to work. I outline all my courses. So I just made a new file there, outline.txt. And I've opened this folder up in a text editor. I'm using VS Code. So here it is. It's just an empty file. So if I'm writing my novel, I'll put some basic stuff in here. I am pretending that I'm writing The Great Gatsby, just so we're upfront about that. It's now in the public domain in 2021. So yep, I'm writing The Great Gatsby. So I'm going to be writing part of chapter 1. So I start the outline. All I know so far, it's very early on in the writing process, is that we're going to meet some of our characters in chapter 1. I haven't figured out what else happens yet. So I'll save that file. And if I come over here and I type git status, we now have made some changes in this project, and Git notices something. It says something it didn't say earlier. Untracked files, outline.txt. All right, so I'm still writing. It's a little bit later in the morning. I've outlined, I need to meet these characters or introduce them in chapter 1. Maybe I want to start by actually fleshing out those characters. I'm going to make a file called characters.txt. So before I actually write chapter 1, I want to make sure I've hammered out the details about those characters. And I'm just going to copy and paste some stuff in I've written. Okay, so we've got Jay Gatsby, Nick Carraway, Daisy Buchanan, Tom Buchanan, just little bios about each character. And if you're following along, you can put whatever you want in here. And then I save the file. All right, so I'm done for the morning. I want to take a break before I actually begin writing chapter 1. So I've saved those files. If I head back over to my terminal and I type git status again, now Git tells me there's two files that it's aware of, but it's not tracking. Okay, so we've done step 1. I've worked on stuff. Now I want to make a commit with what I've done. Well, now we need to talk about a tiny bit of terminology. 3 different locations, or not actual physical locations: working directory, staging area, and the repository. Let's start with this first one, working directory. That's just a fancy way of referring to the directory, the place we're actually working on our project. So for me, my working directory is this My First Novel folder. And in our working directory, I have 2 files at the moment. I might have more. I could have 100 files in here. The working directory just refers to this directory where I'm working. Then we have the repository itself. This is the .git folder. Remember, there is a .git folder here, ls-a, there it is. Inside of that folder, at the moment, there's some stuff that's just there, some default contents. But once I actually make a commit, git commit changes what is in .git. It actually adds new commits to that folder. So when we actually make a commit, we are updating that folder, the actual Git repository. Otherwise, everything I've done so far is just in the working directory. And then there's this intermediate thing, this zone, again, not a physical location, the staging area. And this is where we add our changes to before we make a commit. So here's another flavor of diagram. We have those 3 terms, working directory, staging area, and repository. On the left side, in the working directory, you can see a bunch of changes that I've made. So hypothetically, I've been working for a while. I've done some, I'm working on a project, some web development project, and I've changed 7 files, and Git has noticed that. So I've decided, okay, there's actually 2 discrete things I was working on. And I'm going to make my first commit with those bottom 4 files that I changed. They have to do with the navbar. I updated the navbar, or I created a new navbar on our webpage. So I stage those changes first. And I do that using the git add command. Then I can make a commit. And then same thing for these other changes. I can stage them. Then I make a commit, at which point I'm actually updating the .git folder. So I know I'm kind of beating a dead horse, but this is really important. 2 commands. Git add is just going to stage changes so that I then commit them. And this git add command is pretty simple. It's git space add, and then 1 or more files, the name of a file that we've changed. And we can do more. We can do multiple if we separate them by spaces. Otherwise, we can just do git add file name. So over here, in my working directory, I have these 2 files, right? I've changed them. They exist. They didn't exist earlier, and git noticed. And it tells me this. Let me make this full screen here. It says untracked files, characters, and outline.txt. Use git add file to include in what will be committed. Okay, so why don't we do that? I'll add the first one. So git add, and I can do autocomplete if I type something and then hit tab. So git add characters.txt. Now let's type git status again. I haven't made a commit. All that I've done is stage the one file, characters.txt, to be committed, but it's not yet committed. So if I wanted to, I could make a commit now with just that one file that I changed, but I'm going to group them together because, I worked on them together. They have to do with one another. Unlike this example here, where I wanted to group things into 2 individual commits, I instead want to group everything on this project so far, just 2 files, into one commit. So I'm going to also add outline.txt, and then I'm going to look at git status. We always use git status. It can never hurt anything. It just reports back. And you'll see whenever we make a commit, those 2 files will be included. So what we need to do next is cover git commit. We need to learn how to make those commits.